Bueno, vamos.
Okay, we're starting.
Distinguida delegación.
Distinguished delegations, we shall now proceed with the interactive dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Cambodia. It is my pleasure to welcome to the podium Ms. Rhona Smith, Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Cambodia. The list of speakers will close in 15 minutes. I invite Ms. Smith to present her report. Madam.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good morning. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honour to present my second substantive report on the situation of human rights in Cambodia. I would like to record my humble appreciation to the Council for choosing to extend the mandate of the Special Rapporteur for 2 years in Resolution 3023. I would also like to record my gratitude to the Royal Government of Cambodia for its cordial support for my work, both in terms of the swift issuing of invitations to undertake formal visits and with scheduling of official meetings during my visits. I also acknowledge the statement made by His Excellency Karami at the opening of this Council session and the expressed intention of the Government to support the continuation of the mandate. My report on the situation of human rights over the last year is available as OHCHR 3661. To comply with the UN requirements, it was written and submitted to OHCHR at the beginning of June, though it was possible to include some brief updates following the review by the State. In this oral statement, I primarily intend to update the Council on developments in Cambodia since May, given the radical developments since the report was submitted. As noted at paragraphs 44 to 49, Cambodia is in between elections. The local level Sangkat commune election on the 4th of June 2017 appears to have been orderly, with few irregularities requiring resolution by the National Election Committee. The voter registration programme went well, and some 90% of the electorate cast votes. This is positive and encouraging, given the general election is scheduled for the 29th of July 2018. However, the general situation leading up to and indeed after the election is alarming in a country which claims to be a pluralist, liberal democracy in accordance with the Constitution. There have been 2 particularly pertinent changes in the law on political parties, one in February permitting the dissolution of political parties without appeal, and one in July prohibiting a party from using voice messages, images, written documents or activities of a person convicted of a felony or misdemeanour. In the Cambodian context, these amendments disproportionately affect the political opposition actors. In practice, the fate of the political opposition appears to be in the hands of the executive. Since early August, the presidents of 3 opposition parties have been detained. The regular, violent rhetoric of government ministers and senior minister officers creates fear, a barrier to free elections. The same is true of earlier rhetoric from other parties inciting hatred. As I have said before, with power comes responsibility, and regular threats and scaremongering has no place in a peaceful society such as Cambodia, which still bears the scars of its tragic past. Last year, I noted at paragraph 8 that without genuine conciliatory efforts on the part of the 2 main political parties to re-establish the culture of dialogue in an atmosphere of mutual respect, the situation of human rights in Cambodia could well deteriorate further in the months ahead. As I speak, The President of CNRP, the main opposition party in Cambodia, is in pre-trial detention, which was upheld by the Court of Appeal yesterday, on a charge of conspiracy with a foreign power, an act implying fomenting hostilities or acts of aggression against Cambodia. The government has publicly explained that the conspiracy arose from a speech made by His Excellency Kem Sokha, the President of that political party, in Australia in 2013, which is available online. Despite this, he was claimed to have been arrested in flagrante delicto, therefore obviating the normal processes for removing parliamentary immunity. He was detained in prison, CC3, before being charged and denied many of the legal rights in Cambodian law, including confidential access to his lawyers and the presence of his lawyers during questioning by the investigating judge. I call on the government, Parliament and on the judiciary to take steps to ensure that the in flagrante delicto provisions are only used in situations which meet the normal definition of that term. This is the fourth time in 2 years that it has been used to arrest an opposition member of Parliament. Great care must also be taken to ensure that there is strong evidentiary base for any charges levied. At paragraph 54 of the current report, I note the disparate evidentiary standards used in courts, and I repeat the call for the standard of proof to be the same in all cases and for the Ministry of Justice to consider drafting guidelines on evidentiary requirements. Your Excellencies, Mr. President, the reported pressure on NGOs has been compounded over the last few months with the application of various provisions of the Law on Associations and Non-Governmental Organisations, known as LANGO. All NGOs are required to submit accounts to the Ministry of Interior this month, September. Many organisations have concerns over this, shared by trade unions submitting accounts to the Ministry of Labour. Regular activities of NGOs are also being affected. The Minister of Interior confirmed to me in August that he now requires civil society organisations to report all activities to the commune and district authorities, including education and training activities. Such reporting is not legally required by LANGO and also appears contrary to Cambodia's law on peaceful demonstrations and the associated ministry guidelines. Although the government claims that the reporting is to ensure the safety of NGO staff and facilitate their activities, it is understandable that NGOs consider this an intrusive form of monitoring and control. The application of the provision in LANGO that NGOs must be politically neutral is proving problematic when many activities deemed as critical of the government are considered to be political. A similar provision appears in the trade union law. In contemporary Cambodia, almost anything can be alleged political. Calls for respect for human rights and democracy are now branded as political manipulation and biased attacks against the government. The government should revert to the protection and encouragement of the vibrant civil society for which the country was known and rightly celebrated. Any restrictions on activities should only be as necessary in accordance with both Cambodian and international human rights laws. A related issue is the dramatic reduction in freedom of the media in Cambodia. Starting on the 21st of August 2017, just after I concluded my mission, several radio stations were shut down or had restrictions imposed. Radio is a major source of information in Cambodia, so any restriction in licensing or accessing to bandwidths inevitably limits the freedom of Cambodians to receive information. Earlier, on the 4th of August 2017, the Cambodia Daily newspaper was served with a tax reassessment indicating alleged arrears of some $6.3 million due within 30 days. No due process or negotiations followed. The paper's licence was not renewed, and it published its final edition on the 4th of September this year, bringing to an end its 24 years of independent press reporting. During an election year, political debates and critiques, as well as access to various sources of information, are essential to ensure the electorate can fully understand the policies and goals of those they are being invited to elect. The range of laws employed to restrict criticism against the government and quell political debate continues to increase. Serious charges of secession, insurrection, forgery and treason have been used, with charges of defamation and incitement remaining common. On the evidence available, they seem to be applied inconsistently in a discriminatory manner. There are many dangers with a state being ruled by law rather than in accordance with the rule of law. The government, on its part, has publicly expressed concern over what it considers a campaign of disinformation, twisting historical facts and events in an attempt to create a negative image of Cambodia and blame the government. Indeed, His Excellency Kyuremi elaborated on several aspects of the government view in his statement here this month, and His Excellency Praksakon likewise at the General Assembly last week. Government ministers have often reminded me of the necessity of preserving public order and stability. Whilst this is true, political debates and even criticism of the policies of the government and indeed opposition are a normal part of any democratic society. Yet, restrictions of the democratic space and undermining of democratic institutions have reached an unprecedented level in Cambodia's post-1993 history. Mr. President, Excellencies, in my report, prison overcrowding is noted. This year, the situation has deteriorated to dangerous levels. Due to the government's active campaign against drugs, some 10,000 individuals have been arrested and/or detained. Many remain in prisons, and I observed juveniles detained in the same cells as adult women. Other persons are held in drug rehabilitation or drop-in centres. As they are not permitted to leave such centres, these are, in human rights terms, places of detention. As such, there is work to be done to ensure their detention is regularly reviewed in accordance with law and not arbitrary. Of course, there is also a need for a holistic response to their treatment, rehabilitations and reintegration into society. On the subject of detention centres, I should also note that in August I was again refused permission to hold confidential meetings with detainees in 2 prisons, though I was given open access to drop-in and rehabilitation centres. Mr. President, Excellencies, turning now to formal communications sent to the Government over the last year and treaty body reporting. As per the footnote on page 7 of the report, the 4 staff members of Ad Hoc and the Deputy Secretary of the NEC were released under judicial supervision on the 29th of June. Whilst I welcome their conditional release, given they were detained for 427 days without significant progress in substantiating the charges against them, I call for the charges against them to be definitively dropped through non-suite orders in Article 247 of the Criminal Procedure Code. It is a violation of the right to be tried without undue delay for charges to linger indefinitely and be reactivated seemingly at random. The case of the activist Tep Vanny is also in point. She is currently serving 2.5 years in prison, upheld on appeal in August 2017, for allegedly instigating violence at a demonstration in 2013. Anyone arrested and charged with an offence in accordance with the law has a right to trial without undue delay, according to Article 14(3)(c) of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Should insufficient evidence be available to bring the case to trial, the charges should be dropped and their records expunged completely. I welcome the commitment offered in August by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation to henceforth respond to communications and thereby engage in dialogue with the special procedures on issues of concern. I also welcome the commitment of the Cambodian Human Rights Committee to work on scheduling the submission of overdue UN treaty body reports and planning for the timely submission of reports thereafter. In spite of the foregoing, there have been some positive developments on matters raised in my written report, which were brought to my attention in August. The Ministry of Justice updated me on a number of areas in which progress is planned and confirmed an increase in his budget. The electronic criminal database is being rolled out, and the Ministry is also planning a comprehensive electronic case management system. All applicable court fees will now be displayed, and there is greater use of pre-trial detention forms. These are moves towards greater transparency in the justice system. I was also told of plans to work on raising awareness about judicial supervision as an alternative to pre-trial detention, a possible pilot project on promoting alternatives to custodial sentencing, and plans for alternative dispute resolution in certain appropriate cases. Whilst I welcome the willingness of the Ministry to begin awareness raising and embark on pilot programmes, it is notable that the support of OHCHR Cambodia is sought by the Minister for the first two programmes, rather than relying on Ministry resources. The plans for progressing the Sustainable Development Goals are still being prepared, and I look forward to working with the Government and their chosen development partners on this in the years ahead. Mr. President, Excellencies, as I noted in my end of mission statement in Cambodia last month, the country seems to be moving inexorably towards a precipice. Given the positive commitments to human rights expressed by many government ministers I met in August and their willingness to recognise challenges faced, it is my fervent hope that Cambodia will retreat from the precipice it is teetering on. I undertake to continue monitoring the situation, including during my missions before and after the election. There can be no more threats of violence, quelling insurrections, inciting hatred or racially inflammatory statements from any political party. So many have worked tirelessly in government and out with to ensure the peaceful transition of Cambodia from conflict and genocide to democracy in accordance with the constitution on which modern Cambodia is based. This path must continue, and the gains in human rights protection built by Cambodia since 1993 must be preserved, not undermined. It is what all Cambodians deserve. I pledge to support Cambodia in these endeavours and call on the Council and other states to support Cambodia in this quest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith. In accordance with our practice, we will start by listening to the delegation of the concerned country. So I hereby give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cambodia.
To begin, I wish to recall that Cambodia has attached great importance to the mandate of the Special Rapporteur since 1993. Since then, Cambodia has been in regular dialogue with 6 country Special Rapporteurs for a quarter of a century, during which all requested in situ visits and proposed meetings have been accepted, including those of Professor Rhona Smith. Today, I'd like to thank Professor Smith for the annual report considered at this Council. Despite therein very few encouraging recommendations and positive evaluations are highlighted, disregarded the reality and achievement made. Therefore, my delegation is of the view that The Special Rapporteur's cherry-picking approach in expecting for desired outcomes not only undermines my government's goodwill and commitment towards the special procedure mechanism, but also would pose serious risk to the credibility of the entire UN human rights system. Mr. President, Cambodia's recent past saw egregious crime and despicable human rights abuses, under which millions of lives perished, tormented the entire population. Thanks to the win-win policy of Prime Minister Samdech Hun Sen, this criminal enterprise was ended in 1998. This irreparable tragedy gets strong condemnation by the international community and the UN. As a result, the Khmer Rouge Tribunal was established, on which millions of dollars spent to trial those responsible for this monstrous crime. But unfortunately, once Professor Smith called this crime against humanity simply as, I quote, the trouble of the last century. Today, Cambodia witnessed economic growth of an average 7.7% over a period of more than 2 decades, and it is projected to be at 7.1% this year and the year after. And graduate from lower income to middle income country, poverty rate has declined from 53% in 2004 to 13.5% in 2014, ranking the country as one of the best performing economies in the world. In addition, in June this year, communal elections, 7.8 out of 9.6 million eligible voters registered to cast their ballots, and the turnout was unprecedented high at 89.52%. But again, unfortunately, the Special Rapporteur negatively sees those outstanding performances merely as a glass half empty, by extemporaneously stating that, I quote, the general situation of the country remains tense, and Cambodia appears to be approaching a precipice. In other words, since 1993, this country has seated both country Special Rapporteur and the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights. Last year, the government extended another 2-year term for the office, whereas the mandate of Special Rapporteur will also be extended for 2 more years. Cambodia is party to 8 out of 9 core international human rights instruments and has accepted 79.5% of the recommendation made at the second cycle of the UPR, reflecting the government's commitment to address the international community's concern. But to the contrary, based on selective and unverified sources, the Special Rapporteur construed that, I quote, Cambodia's situation is reaching a dangerous tipping point. Needless to say, political manipulation has been persistently conducted against my government, only to besmirch it at best. Irrespective of its sound performance and achievement, the politicization of the recent development, particularly the arrest of one parliamentarian, the closure of a handful of media, including one NGO, in accordance with law and regulation, is a good case in point. Therefore, for Cambodia, as history has shown, without peace, stability and development, democracy and human rights are just paper left on the bookshelf getting dust. However, I like to reiterate that Cambodia remains committed to cooperate and partner with all UN human rights mechanisms and relevant stakeholders to further promotion and protection of human rights, based on mutual respect and principle of non-interference as mentioned in the UN Charter and other international human rights instruments. I thank you, Mr. President.
I would now like to inform you that the list of speakers is closed. I would now like to ask interested delegations to ask questions of the Special Procedures Mandate holder and to make comments on her report. I would like to respectfully remind you that the maximum speaking time is 2 minutes for all. I now give the floor to the delegation of the European Union.
Gracias, Presidente. Thank you, Mr. President. The European Union thanks the Special Rapporteur, Rhona Smith, for her report on Cambodia. We recognize the government of Cambodia's ongoing engagement with the Special Rapporteur and other UN mechanisms, as also demonstrated by its support of the OHCHR field office in Phnom Penh. And we welcome that the local elections of June 4, 2017 were generally peaceful, with largely incident-free election campaigns. We concur with the Special Rapporteur's overall assessment that whilst there were signs of progress in some areas of human rights, these have recently been overshadowed by numerous human rights concerns and political tensions. The European Union is deeply concerned about the use of judicial proceedings against opposition politicians and NGO figures in ways that appear to be politically motivated, including the treason charges brought against opposition leader Kem Sokha, in apparent breach of his parliamentary immunity. We are also concerned about the closure of various media outlets and NGOs such as Cambodia Daily and the National Democratic Institute, and restrictions and intimidation against human rights defenders and activists. We call on the Cambodian authorities to take immediate steps to restore prospects for a free and fair election in 2018 by ensuring that all political parties, civil society and media organizations can freely carry out their legitimate roles without threats, fear or intimidation. We would like to ask the Special Rapporteur, given the actions that have taken place since your report was published, what prospects do you now see of there being free and fair national elections in 2018, and what more can this Council do to support respect for human rights in the build-up to the elections? I thank you. Gracias, Presidente.
Germany has the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor Presidente. We align ourselves with the statement of the European Union. Germany is deeply concerned about increased restrictions on civil society, the media and the opposition in Cambodia. Human rights defenders suffer from continued intimidation. Legislation such as the Law on Associations and Non-Governmental Organizations (LANGO), as well as tax regulations, seem to be instrumentalized to silence critical voices. Several NGOs had to cease their operations. The freedom of speech and the freedom of the press, vital for a democratic society, are under threat. Radio stations were suspended, one major English newspaper closed, authors of critical articles are repeatedly taken into custody. Government actions against opposition politicians are of particular concern, as they threaten to undermine the democratic process ahead of next year's elections. We have observed the arrest of several party leaders, including opposition leader Kem Sokha. The disrespect of the parliamentary immunity in his and other cases has to be considered as a violation of the rule of law. We call on the government of Cambodia to take immediate and effective steps to re-establish an enabling environment for pluralistic views, as expressed by civil society, the media and opposition parties. In order to give credibility to next year's elections, government needs to allow for an open climate of debate. An important signal in this respect would be the release of Kem Sokha. We would like to ask the Special Rapporteur. NGOs should be valued as an important partner in addressing controversial topics. They play an important role in the democratic process. How can we strengthen the civil society in Cambodia? Thank you.
Switzerland has the floor. President, Switzerland thanks the Special Rapporteur for her report, and we'd like to offer her our full support. Switzerland welcomes the Cambodian government's cooperation with the Special Rapporteur during her August 2017 visit, as well as the signature of the MOU with the local office of the High Commission for Human Rights in December 2016. We encourage the government to pursue this cooperation in the future. Ms. Special Rapporteur, Switzerland has taken note of your analysis of the protection of vulnerable groups mentioned in the report. We call upon Cambodia, like you, to bring its legislation into line with its international human rights obligations in order to ensure judicial independence. With this in mind, Switzerland underscores the importance of respecting the right to a fair trial with equality of arms. Whilst recognising democratic progress and the successful local elections in June 2017, we share your concern with regard to political tension and recent developments, in particular the constraints on civil society, particularly NGOs, political activists and the media. Switzerland calls upon Cambodia to ensure that all people enjoy the freedom of opinion, expression, meeting and association in line with national and international obligations so that free and fair elections can be held. Special Rapporteur, in your opinion, what is the most urgent measure that the Cambodian government should take to ensure that the upcoming elections in 2018 are held smoothly and democratically? And what can the international community do to support democratic space in Cambodia? And lastly, what measures do you think should be taken to ensure judicial independence in Cambodia? Thank you. Japan has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Madam Special Rapporteur, Japan highly appreciates the active approach you have taken to your work since assuming your mandate in May 2015. For example, including your visit this August, you have visited Cambodia 4 times and have not only met with representatives of the Cambodian government, but have also traveled to the provinces to meet with people from various backgrounds. After experiencing a tragic civil war, Cambodia went on to achieve remarkable economic developments to the benefit of many. And while improvements have been seen as a result of the Cambodian government's effort, outstanding issues have yet to be addressed. Japan welcomes the report that June communal elections have been carried out in a relatively peaceful and orderly manner. We are, however, paying close attention to the recent situation in Cambodia ahead of the next year's general election. Japan appreciates Cambodia's acceptance of the international observers to promote increased transparency in its elections to date. We expect Cambodia to avail of international technical cooperation, including the UN mechanism, to ensure that next year's important election will also be open to the international observers. In this aspect, we welcome the positive engagement of Special Rapporteur. As penholder, Japan has submitted a draft resolution on the human rights situation in Cambodia, which includes a 2-year extension of the mandate of the Special Rapporteur. As with previous resolution, we expect this draft resolution to be adopted by consensus. Madam Special Rapporteur, concerns have been raised regarding heightening tensions in Cambodia, including with regard to the restrictions on the activities of civil society and the media. Can you please share your impression of the effects of this situation on the general public and their reaction to it, including in the provinces, as well as your thoughts on the backgrounds of this heightening of the tension? Also, in your understanding, what kind of technical cooperation does Cambodia need in order to improve the situation? I thank you, Mr. President.
France has the floor. Thank you, President. I endorse the statement made by the European Union. I would like to praise Ms. Rhona Smith's work and thank her for the report, which doesn't allay our concerns about the human rights situation in Cambodia. Special Rapporteur, over the past year, we've seen some very worrying developments for democracy in Cambodia. As you have clearly pointed out, the authorities don't appear to have implemented all their commitments. We're particularly concerned about the way in which the 2015 Act on NGO registration is being implemented. It should be done in a way which respects fundamental freedoms. We're also concerned about the closure of several media outlets in Cambodia. We'd like to recall that France is deeply attached to freedom of expression, particularly press freedom, freedom of association and peaceful demonstrations, and the vital role that civil society plays in political and economic development in all countries. We call upon the Cambodian Authority to ensure civil society has the necessary space to be heard. We're also concerned at the recent arrest of Kem Sokha, the leader of the main opposition party. We insist that in view of the upcoming legislative elections, that Cambodia returns to plural democracy, respects human rights and fundamental freedoms. We join our European partners in offering support to the Cambodian authorities for this end. An independent judicial system ensures fair justice as guaranteed by the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, to which Cambodia is a state party. We're also concerned about the arrest of various human rights defenders, and we call upon the Cambodian authorities to do everything to shed light on the death of the commentator Kem Lee. There are still wide gaps between men and women in Cambodian society. They're worrying. As you know, France is committed to fighting violence against women and in favour of their empowerment. We encourage Cambodia party to CEDAW to take all necessary measures in order to put a stop to discrimination against women. Also, we are deeply committed to the justice work being carried out by the Khmer Rouge Tribunal and hope that it will be able to complete its mission. Thank you. Thailand has the floor.
Mr. President, let me begin by thanking the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Cambodia for her report. Thailand commends Cambodia for its cooperation extended to the Special Rapporteur and the OHCHR. We welcome the commitments and progress made by Cambodia, particularly in the Action Plan for Improving Child Care, the National Strategic Plan of Identification for the Minorities, along with the preparation for Cambodia's strategy to implement SDGs. We also welcome Cambodia's ongoing positive efforts in reforming its educational and judicial systems, in line with its accepted UPR recommendations. As a close neighbor and fellow ASEAN member, Thailand will continue to cooperate closely with Cambodia. In this regard, and in the spirit of Agenda Item 10, we welcome Cambodia's participation in recent ASEAN workshop on education for out-of-school children and seminar on combating transnational crime hosted by Thailand. This reflects our shared commitment to turn human rights standards into concrete action. Thailand reaffirms our readiness to support Cambodia's effort in the promotion and protection of human rights to ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you, Mr. President.
Australia has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Australia would like to join others in thanking the Special Rapporteur for her report. We welcome Cambodia's ongoing cooperation with the Special Rapporteur and its engagement with the UPR process, continuing Cambodia's positive history of UN cooperation. We also welcome ongoing efforts by Cambodia to guarantee the rights of women, including those facing gender-based violence, and of persons with disabilities. Australia is pleased to partner with Cambodia on practical initiatives to address these challenges. The June 2017 commune elections were conducted in a generally peaceful atmosphere. The highest recorded voter turnout is a demonstration of the Cambodian people's resolute commitment to democracy. Nonetheless, Australia shares the Special Rapporteur's concern that the democratic space in Cambodia is shrinking. We are particularly concerned at recent developments, including reduced access to free media, the closure of a pro-democracy non-government organisation, and increasing intimidation of the opposition, specifically the arrest and ongoing detention of opposition leader Kem Sokha. Australia urges Cambodia to provide a safe and enabling environment for Cambodians to practice their rights to freedom of expression, assembly and association, a vibrant media and an active opposition. Australia would, like others, welcome the Special Rapporteur's views on how the Council can best support Cambodia to prepare for free, fair and transparent national elections in July 2018. I thank you for your attention.
The Czech Republic has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Czech Republic aligns itself with the statement by the European Union. We attach great importance to the work of UN human rights mechanisms. Therefore, we commend the important work of Mrs. Smith and her report. The Czech Republic welcomes the ongoing cooperation of the Cambodian government with the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner and the Special Rapporteur. We call upon Cambodia to strengthen its efforts aimed at implementing the recommendations by the UN treaty bodies, the Special Rapporteur, and during the Universal Periodic Review process. Madam Special Rapporteur, while noting the historic progress in the country since the signing of the Paris Peace Agreement in 1991, we are concerned about your findings, in particular those regarding the diminishing democratic space and restrictions on freedom of expression, association and peaceful assembly. The arrest of opposition leader Kem Sokha and the closure of the Cambodian daily belong to the most recent negative developments. The 2017 local elections were held in a peaceful manner with a high voter turnout. We hope that the 2018 general elections will be not only peaceful but also conducted in a fair, free and transparent manner with broad participation. The Czech Republic therefore encourages the Cambodian authorities to ensure that rights and freedoms of all political parties members, human rights defenders and media are fully respected. Madam Special Rapporteur, in your report you mention challenges stemming from balancing between the need to maintain public order and security with freedoms of expression, assembly and association. What role do you envisage for the government as well as the international community in ensuring that those freedoms are fully protected in accordance with the Cambodian international obligations and international law? Thank you.
The United States of America has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The United States expresses its appreciation for the report of the Special Rapporteur. We note the progress cited in the report, including on education and the rights of children, and with regard to continued economic development. However, the United States remains gravely concerned about the government of Cambodia's ongoing crackdown on opposition parties, independent media, and civil society. Events of late August and early September, including the politically motivated arrest and detention of opposition leader Kem Sokha, have underscored the need for continued attention by the Council. Furthermore, we are concerned about the arbitrary use of registration and tax regulations to intimidate, shut down, or expel civil society groups and independent media outlets, as reflected in the abrupt closures of the Cambodia Daily and Radio Free Asia, and the expulsion of the National Democratic Institute. We urge the government of Cambodia to immediately release Kem Sokha and to lift restrictions on independent media and civil society organizations so they can continue their important work in support of credible national elections in 2018. Madam Special Rapporteur, what have you observed regarding preparations for free and fair national elections in 2018, and what can the international community do to support them? Thank you.
United Nations UNICEF has the floor.
Mr. President, children in residential care facilities in Cambodia remain among the most vulnerable. They are at high risk of physical and sexual abuse and exploitation. The absence of a comprehensive child protection system and critical shortage of government social workers deprive children and families from accessing child protection services when most needed. The government recently launched the mapping report of residential care facilities and the action plan for improving child care, aiming to safely return 30% of children in residential care to their families by the end of 2018. UNICEF congratulates Cambodia for these efforts and its commitment to child protection. Families need support so that children are not needlessly placed in residential care. Poverty should never be a justification for removing a child from parental care, for their institutionalization or preventing their reintegration, but should be seen as a signal for the need for support to the family. UNICEF is working with the government and NGOs to reunite children with their families. While no new residential care facilities have opened since 2016, more support and funding should go towards social protection programs to empower vulnerable families and to expand family-based alternative care, such as foster care and domestic adoption. Strengthening national and subnational child protection systems is also key to preventing and responding to other child protection concerns, such as child labor, trafficking, living and working on the streets, and children in conflict with the law. The increasing number of children in detention is a concern. More government investment is needed to increase the number of social workers and to strengthen the national child protection system in Cambodia. This is vital for preventing unnecessary family separation and to give children family care instead of institutionalization in order to protect all children from violence, abuse and exploitation. Mr. President, UNICEF reaffirms its commitment to support the government in its efforts to realize the rights of all children in Cambodia. I thank you.
China has the floor.
Mr. President, China noted the recent statement by the Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in Cambodia. The relevant remarks by her contains rather subjective prejudices and fail to reflect the human rights progress in Cambodia in a true and comprehensive manner. Therefore, does not conform to the HRC principles of objectivity, impartiality, and non-selectivity. China expresses its regret at this. In recent years, with the efforts of the leaders of the Cambodian government and the people, the country maintains peace, stability, economic development, leading to improvement in people's lives. China supports Cambodia in light of its national economic, social development level, history, and cultural tradition to choose a human rights development path and a model suitable to its national circumstances. We call on the international community to provide it with constructive help in light of the will of the government and the people. We hope that the relevant parties will proceed from the well-being of all Cambodian people and contribute more to stability and development in the country. Thank you.
The United Kingdom has the floor.
Mr. President, the United Kingdom supports the earlier EU statement and thanks the Special Rapporteur, Rhona Smith, for her report and her statement today, which raised many serious concerns. The UK remains greatly concerned about the human rights situation in Cambodia. We share the Special Rapporteur's concerns about the amendments to the law on political parties, and we urge the Government of Cambodia to ensure an environment conducive to the conduct of political activities by all political parties. We are deeply concerned about the use of judicial proceedings against opposition leader Kem Sokha and other opposition politicians and NGO figures in ways that appear to be politically motivated. Together with harsh restrictions on media outlets and NGOs, including the enforced closure of Cambodia Daily and the National Democratic Institute, these measures imperil multi-party democracy and free debate. The UK urges the Government of Cambodia to build on the encouraging progress we saw at Cambodia's nationwide elections just over 3 months ago by taking immediate steps to ensure that free, fair and credible elections take place in July 2018. A democratic environment in which human rights are respected helps to create a stable society and thriving economy and will aid investment in Cambodia. We encourage the Government of Cambodia to explore ways in which the international community can assist in implementing the Special Rapporteur's recommendations. The UK would like to ask the Special Rapporteur, given the threats and intimidation faced by human rights defenders in Cambodia and the essential role they play, how do you minimise the risk of reprisals for those you meet from civil society during your country visits? Thank you.
Mexico has the floor. Thank you, President. We thank the Special Rapporteur for presenting her report, and we encourage the government to pursue its cooperation with international human rights mechanisms, thereby contributing to the promotion and protection of human rights in the country. We recognise the progress made, and we praise you for the Memorandum of Understanding signed in December of last year between the UN and Cambodia, establishing a country office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Nevertheless, we are concerned about the prevailing political situation in the country, in which trade unionists and human rights defenders could be faced by threats, harassment, detention, pre-trial detention and legal proceedings. This climate of repression is particularly worrying in view of the upcoming elections in 2018. That's why we reiterate the importance of holding a calm election process without threats or detentions, acts of intimidations, which respect international human rights obligations in the context of elections, such as the right of freedom of expression, association and assembly. We also encourage the government to release human rights defenders who haven't got any evidence against them, and ensure that the judiciary are fully trained in international rules on freedom of expression. Lastly, we encourage the government to meet the recommendations made by the Special Rapporteur, which are still outstanding, as well as those from the UPR, with a view to drawing up an action plan for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, enhancing the protection, respect and promotion of human rights for all Cambodians. Thank you. Myanmar has the floor.
Mr. President, my delegation thanks the Permanent Representative of Cambodia for the updated information on the situation of human rights in his country. We also take note of the report of the Special Rapporteur. We commend the Cambodia's open and constructive engagement with the international human rights mechanism, including the special procedure of the Human Rights Council. We congratulate the progress that has been achieved by Cambodia over the past year. We encourage the international community to provide technical assistance and capacity building for the national development and improvement of overall human rights situation. As a fellow member of ASEAN, Myanmar wishes Cambodia a great success in its political, economic, and social information. I thank you, Mr. President.
Irlanda tiene el uso de la
Ireland has the floor.
Ireland aligns itself with the statement of the European Union. Mr. President, Ireland would like to thank the Special Rapporteur for her report. Ireland is deeply concerned by the deterioration in civil society and democratic space in Cambodia, where NGO representatives, trade union members, journalists and human rights defenders still find themselves subject to threats and harassment, arrest, pre-trial detention and prosecution. The use of law and association and NGOs and other legal and administrative measures to monitor and limit the space for civil society is troubling. Ireland urges the government of Cambodia to ensure civil society and other actors are free to operate without the threat of persecution. In the lead-up to the national elections in 2018, we are particularly concerned at the arrest of Kem Sokha in spite of his parliamentary immunity. We call on the government to uphold freedoms of expression and association and to enable political engagement in line with the relevant laws as well as the human rights obligations of Cambodia to take place. Ireland would be interested in hearing the Special Rapporteur's views on how recent developments in Cambodia have affected the space for civil society in the country. Thank you.
I now give the floor to the Lao People's Democratic Republic.
Mr. President, my delegation thanks Special Rapporteur for the report. And we also thank Cambodia for comprehensive presentation on the human rights situation in her country. My delegation commends Cambodia's constructive engagement and cooperation with United Nations human rights mechanism, including the UPR process and treaty bodies. We also pleased to note the Cambodian strong efforts towards improving human rights situation on the ground by promoting freedom of press and media, enhancing rule of law, and widening democratic space and participation in the political process. We, in particular, welcome the process of election of the Commons Council held on 4th June 2017 in free and fair manner. The Lapidea comments Cambodia has achieved a healthy economic growth of 7.7% in average for last 2 decades and expect to achieve growth rate at 7.1% in 2017 and 2018. In conclusion, Mr. President, while we are encouraging Cambodia to continue its effort to further promote and protect human rights in the country, my delegation called on the international community to have a constructive engagement and provide technical assistance and capacity building to Cambodia in order to enable them to fulfill its international human rights obligation. I thank you.
I will now turn to the list of speakers from national human rights institutions and non-governmental organisations. I now give the floor to the International Catholic Child Bureau.
Mr. President, BC and Operation Enfants du Cambodge would like to thank Professor Rhona Smith for her updates on her last visit in August to Cambodia. Alongside a difficult political situation that requires genuine attention from the Special Rapporteur, she did focus her mission on discrimination and marginalization of children, especially the trafficking and exploitation phenomena. Despite some progress made on the implementation of the right of the child, concerns remain about neglect and abuse of children, sex tourism, a high rate of school dropout, lack of access to education, dependency to drugs, and children in street situations. The more the children are left without protection and a real access to education, the more they are subjected to exploitation, trafficking, and abuse. In addition, the impunity of child abuse perpetrators at school, within the family, and in child care institutions deprives victims from due remedy and redress, and from benefiting from counseling, care, and reintegration programs. The lack of legal, medical, and psychosocial services jeopardizes effective access to justice for abused children. Our organizations would like to formulate to the government the following recommendations and rely some stated by the Special Rapporteur and in her press statement of 18 August. 1. Ensure child rights are duly integrated throughout all national action plans from a child rights-based perspective. 2. Strengthen capacities of social workers within the National Social Protection Policy Framework 2016-2026. 3. Facilitate criminal proceedings against abuse perpetrators while easing and speeding judicial proceedings for victims, including effective free medical certificate, access to legal aid, and implementation of rehabilitation, counseling, and social reintegration programs. Finally, we recommend that this year Human Rights Council resolution on Cambodia renews the mandate of the Special Rapporteur and provide for stronger in-country child-sensitive monitoring steps. Thank you, Mr. President.
Human
Rights Watch has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since the last resolution adopted on Cambodia, the civil and political rights environment has worsened significantly, and as we've heard today, further deteriorated since the Council heard the Special Rapporteur's previous report last September, culminating in the shuttering of the Cambodia Daily and the arrest of opposition leader Kem Sokha just before this session started. On June 29th, the 4 senior staff members of the Human Rights and Development Association, held in pretrial detention for 427 days, were released on bail in the wake of sustained international pressure. Yet authorities are proceeding with their prosecution and they still face 5 to 10 years in prison. The Bongkak Lake activist Tep Vanny, who spent over 1 year in prison, continues to be imprisoned. In July, Prime Minister Hun Sen ordered the Ministry of Interior to investigate 2 members of the Situation Room, a group of civil society organizations coordinating election monitoring, alleging that they violated the vague and undefined concept of political neutrality enshrined in the law on associations and non-governmental organizations. Almost all domestically broadcast media is now under government control. In August, orders were issued to close and revoke the license of Mahanakor Radio and its affiliates, which broadcast Voice of America and Radio Free Asia. Independent radio station Voice of Democracy was also closed. In August and September, authorities used the General Department of Taxation to intimidate and shut down civil society groups and independent media outlets, including the Cambodia Daily. The arrest of Kem Sokha, leader of the Cambodia National Rescue Party, on charges of treason, followed earlier politically motivated prosecutions of several other elected opposition leaders, as part of an unprecedented surge in the detention of opposition supporters and civil society activists, with at least 35 documented cases since July 2015. The Cambodian government's actions amount to a comprehensive campaign of intimidation, violence, and misuse of legal mechanisms in the lead-up to next year's national election. In view of this campaign, pre-election reporting, followed by council discussion, should be a red line in the resolution currently under consideration. Thank you.
The World Organization Against Torture has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Professor Smith, we address you today amid a rapidly deteriorating attack on Cambodian democracy. OMCT believes that Cambodia could not possibly hold free and fair elections in 2018 if the current situation persists. We are deeply concerned by the ruling party's ongoing false narrative of a color revolution that paints the political opposition, civil society, and independent voices as would-be revolutionaries and is used to justify the militarization of public life. Of major concern to OMCT is also the near elimination of the main opposition party through the arrest and detention of opposition leader Kem Sokha, as well as 2 rounds of controversial amendment to the law on political parties. We are also disturbed by the drastic escalation of physical and legal threats against leaders and key organizations of Cambodians' once vibrant civil society. Examples include the recent arbitrary detention and charging of Dom Kundi and Hun Vanak from NGO Mother Nature, the arbitrary detention for 427 days and charging of 4 staffers of NGO Ad Hoc and the Deputy Secretary General of the National Election Committee, and the continuing imprisonment and charging of prominent land activist Tep Vanny. The crackdown against the civil society has also included the discriminatory enforcement of the controversial NGO law and trade union law. More recently, the targeted enforcement of Cambodia's tax system to silence critical voices has led to the enforced closure of the independent newspaper, the Cambodia Daily, which, paired with the near total shutdown of independent radio broadcasts, represent a major blow to democracy. Professor Smith, we believe that it is not too late to halt and reverse current trends in order to secure what is left of Cambodia's civic space. We call upon the international community to take a principled and vocal stand against Cambodia's rapid descent into outright authoritarianism. With critical voices silenced, the Cambodian people need your steadfast support more than ever. Thank you.
Artículo 19.
I recognize Article 19.
Mr. President, Article 19 is deeply concerned at the deteriorating situation for the right to freedom of expression in Cambodia, in particular the continuation of attacks against journalists, human rights defenders and political opposition, including through judicial harassment. The escalation of this crackdown in recent weeks shows that the government almost complete disregard for recommendations previously made to it under this ceiling. Just in recent weeks, independent media have been targeted and in some instances forced to close. Prominent independent newspaper, the Cambodia Daily, was forced to close in September 2017, following demands for it to pay 10 years of tax arrears totaling $6.3 million. The newspaper's leadership have been banned from leaving the country and face criminal charges. In August, the government revoked the licenses of various radio stations that relay broadcasts of Radio Free Asia and Voice of America, and closed local independent radio station Voice of Democracy. A warrant was earlier issued for the deputy director in Cambodia of Radio Free Asia. Human rights defenders, especially environmental defenders, are also at risk. Since the July 2016 murder of environmental human rights defender Kem Lay, attacks or threats in the same year have continued against environmental defenders, persons speaking out against environmental degradation and the illegal activities of logging and extractive companies and associated public officials. Since this Human Rights Council session began in September, 2 Mother Nature activists were arrested and charged with incitement and invasion of privacy under the Cambodian Criminal Code for covering illegal sand dredging. 5 human rights defenders, 4 of whom were ad hoc staff, together with the Deputy Secretary General of the National Election Committee, were detained without trial for more than a year, following their arrest in April 2016 and only released on bail in June. We condemn that many who campaigned for their release, including through the Black Monday protests, have been targeted. We also call for the reform to the Penal Code, which continues to be abused to silence political opposition. We ask the Special Rapporteur what she can do ahead of elections next year to address these challenges. Thank you.
Asian Forum for Human
Rights and Development has the floor.
Mr. President, Forum Asia notes the report of the Special Rapporteur. We support the extension of her mandate and call on her to conduct 2 official visits to the country before the 2018 elections. We are concerned at unprecedented increase in attacks and restrictions on civil society, media and the opposition in the aftermath of the Commune Council elections in June. The government has adopted a series of repressive laws and amendments to existing laws, and in recent months used its tax system to constrain civil society and media ahead of next year's general elections. In July, the Prime Minister ordered investigations into 2 members of the Election Monitoring Coalition Situation Room for failing to register under Lengo and allegedly violating political neutrality after they reported that the June commune elections were not free and fair. Several NGOs have also been targeted for alleged offences under the tax law. Concerns over shrinking democratic space ahead of the July 2018 general elections have been further heightened by intensified attacks on media. On 4 September, Cambodia Daily was forced to cease its operations following an arbitrary order from Cambodia's General Department of Taxation to pay $6.3 million in taxes and several public threats to prosecute its owner. Similarly, the government has effectively taken control of all domestic broadcast media with orders to close and revoke licenses of several radio stations, including independent radio station Voice of Democracy as well as Mahana Core Radio and its affiliates. The escalation in attacks have added to several outstanding concerns, including the continued detention of land rights defender Tap Bani, the chilling effect created by the murder of political analyst Kem Lay, and pending charges against 4 ad hoc staff and the Secretary General of National Elections Committee who were recently released on bail. The Council should act immediately and call for a reversal of the current deterioration and closely scrutinize the situation ahead of the 2018 general elections. Thank you.
International
Commission of Jurists has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The International Commission of Jurists welcomes the report of the Special Rapporteur and strongly supports the renewal of her mandate. Monitoring and action by the international community has seldom been more important for Cambodia since the Paris Peace Accords were signed in 1991.
Civil society, independent media and the political opposition are under sustained attack in what appears to be a carefully orchestrated effort to silence dissenting voices in the lead-up to national elections in July 2018. Vague legal provision in, for instance, the law on association and non-governmental organization and the law on political parties are being weaponized to this end. Human rights defenders and others, including the Haddock Four, Nai Chakraya Teb Vani, Vanak Dom Kundi, and the president of the opposition party, Kem Sokha, face criminal charges with all the hallmarks of being politically motivated. Prosecutors and judges lack independence and impartiality, and investigation routinely fall short of international standards, and as in the case of the killing of political commentator Kem Lay. Seeking to justify its action, Cambodia frequently invokes the principle of the rule of law. The ICJ, a global organization of judges and lawyers, has worked for the rule of law for more than 60 years. The rule of law doesn't simply mean that laws exist and are enforced, but requires, among other things, equal application of the law without discrimination, including due to political or other opinion, and ensuring that laws are only adopted and applied consistent with international human rights law. What is happening in Cambodia today has nothing to do with the rule of law. The ICJ would therefore ask the Special Rapporteur what further recommendations she has towards seeing the rule of law as properly understood truly reign in Cambodia. Thank you.
Lawyers' Rights Watch Canada has the floor.
Lawyers' Rights Watch Canada appreciates the Special Rapporteur's report, including remarks on the administration of justice. We share her concern about the pre-trial detention of lawyer Mr. Nai Chakraya and 4 other rights defenders for over a year, in contravention of conclusions of the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention that the detentions were arbitrary. While they were released in June, charges have not been dismissed. This case exemplifies injustices imposed by courts that do not operate independently from the executive. Establishing human rights and an independent judiciary are key obligations of the 1991 Paris Peace Agreements to end years of conflict and atrocities that destroyed millions of lives and all of Cambodia's institutions. Since then, Cambodia has ratified numerous human rights treaties, and its 1993 constitution incorporates international human rights and an independent judiciary. Despite these legal obligations and recommendations of UPRs, treaty bodies, and every representative and rapporteur since 1994, Cambodia has no independent courts. This enables Cambodia to continue and increase violations of its international human rights law obligations by creating and misapplying laws and procedures that restrict or criminalize legitimate, peaceful activities of political dissenters, civil society, rights defenders, and independent journalists. We share all concerns expressed in the draft resolution to renew the Special Rapporteur's mandate and ask all Council members to support it. We urge Cambodia to cooperate with all special procedures mandate holders and to institute a genuinely independent judiciary that will uphold protected rights to freedoms of peaceful expression, association, and assembly. Thank you, Mr. President.
International Federation for Human Rights Leagues has the floor.
Mr. President, Madam Special Rapporteur, FIDH thanks you for your updates. We condemn the Cambodian government's intensified crackdown on human rights defenders, activists, government critics, independent media, and members of the political opposition. We are now witnessing a full-on attack on Cambodian civil society, which is likely to continue in the months leading up to next year's general elections, scheduled for 29th of July 2018. Without the ability for Cambodian citizens to fully enjoy their rights to freedom of expression, peaceful assembly and association, there is no chance that next year's election will be credible, inclusive or participatory. Prime Minister Hun Sen's administration continues to rely on draconian laws, repressive government agencies and a judiciary that lacks independence from the executive branch to silence any expression of dissent. We call on the government to repeal the law on associations and NGOs and stop arbitrary arrests and prosecutions of activists, human rights defenders and government critics. All those currently detained, including land rights defender Thep Vanny, must be immediately and unconditionally released. Cambodian civil society needs the support of the international community now more than ever. We urge the Council to renew the mandate of the Special Rapporteur for 2 more years and instruct her to provide an update on the human rights situation in Cambodia at its 38th regular session. If the human rights situation further deteriorates, the Council should also hold an urgent debate on Cambodia on its 37th regular session. I thank you.
Cedo la palabra.
I give the floor to Ms. Schmidt so that concluding remarks may be made.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your comments and your questions. Given the constrictions of time, I stand willing to meet and liaise with all of the speakers hereafter as necessary to complete updates and to provide and exchange further information. I note the numerous requests for more regular updates and for greater monitoring reporting, and also the numerous requests and comments concerning technical assistance and cooperation for Cambodia. There have been many challenges with this mandate over the last 2 years, which the resolution provided for. An unexpected one has been the issue of capacity, and I think this is something which is obviously within the domain of the Human Rights Council and the States of the United Nations. As your Excellencies are aware, there are a number of incredibly dedicated and gifted staff in OHCHR, many of them in this room, but they are not the answer to everything concerning Cambodia. It's not their role. They can work and follow a number of programmes, but they are restrained by the budget, as everything is, and I have found problems with this over the years that is not their making. I have the benefit of an excellent country team with the Deputy Representative in Cambodia, the heads of the unit, fantastic staff with a huge amount of knowledge and skills, and a very full and comprehensive UN country team. I rely on them greatly, particularly with the issues concerning reprisals which was raised, and with regular updating and the gathering of information on Cambodia. However, again, they are limited by budget. Excellencies, many of your countries have restrictions in budgets, as indeed do many NGOs and civil society organisations. OHCHR performs incredible work with very little funding compared with other elements within the United Nations. During this crucial election period in Cambodia, when you wish to be regularly appraised of the situation on the ground, please do bear this in mind, which can preclude more regular visits by me to Cambodia. I'm restricted by the budget and what it permits. This mandate is, as you know, based on a resolution under item 10. Therefore, it is technical assistance and capacity building. Whilst Cambodia has developed rapidly economically and has greatly increased wealth compared to when the mandate was established as a special representative of the Secretary-General, it is for you, the States of the Council and the United Nations to determine what level of assistance can and should now be funded, and to what extent Cambodia should assume greater responsibility for protecting and promoting rights and freedoms in fulfilment of the treaty obligations it has voluntarily accepted. For elections to be free, full, credible, in accordance with international human rights law and indeed many aspects of the Constitution of Cambodia, it's necessary that the current voter registration system, which is reopened, continues, and that all those eligible to vote are able to vote irrespective of their particular disabilities, irrespective of their personal status. It should make no difference, or their political opinions. Also, there should be full information on what people are voting for. So there should be access to information, freedom of expression, association, assembly, voter education and awareness, so that they can understand what each political party stands for and wishes to be elected on. There must be free choice without any intimidation before the election, so from now on, and indeed threats after the election. Free elections demand those voting make a choice without threat, intimidation or possible violence as a consequence. I take note of His Excellency, the Cambodian Ambassador's comments. With respect to my summary, that the country is teetering on a precipice and that the situation remains tense, I would stand by my comments. And I would, in support of those comments, also reference many comments made by Cambodian government ministers in the months preceding this session. There have been comments about people voting in the election having to prepare the coffins, about people being beaten with bamboo rods, possibilities of people with teeth being smashed, of blood in the streets. These, to me, irrespective of the comments by the government that they were educative in nature and not intimidation or threats, these are comments which indicate that in the government itself they feel the country is approaching the precipice to which I refer. If the government's comments were more neutral about stability and peace continuing in the country, perhaps there would be room for more negotiation on that fact. Your Excellencies, Mr. President, I would also comment that the references to children's rights I will be elaborating on in my report to the next Council session, so that's why I'm not elaborating on them in responses to the questions. I think it's a case that now the situation in Cambodia is such that decisions do have to be made in the Council as to what support can be available for the government and what support is appropriate to provide and what should be done by the government and verified in order to ensure the full and free enjoyment of all human rights and all fundamental freedoms in the country from now on, and including the credibility of the elections. In my opinion, the credibility of the elections is under threat at the moment because of the current environment, but I agree with the comments of many interlocutors that it is possible to retreat from the precipice, and it is still possible to advance an open environment in Cambodia for full and free elections. With respect to my future missions, I would hope to be able to have another mission this year in accordance with the normal funding requirements, and I am hopeful to have another visit before the elections take place. Should further updates be required, I am willing and able to undertake further missions if the budget allows, and equally with further reporting to the Council. I repeat my commitment to work with Cambodia and work with the development partners Cambodia chooses, and work with all other stakeholders in advancing the cause of human rights and freedoms in Cambodia. It is what Cambodians deserve and wish, and it is what, it's my understanding, most of the states in this room also wish for Cambodia, and I stand willing to serve in whatever way I can. Thank you.
Distinguished members of the delegations, we have concluded our interactive dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in Cambodia. I wish to thank Ms. Rhona Smith for her presentation, and my thanks also to all participants for their contributions to our discussion. Distinguished delegates, given the late arrival of His Excellency the President of the Central African Republic, I can inform you that we are hoping to see him at 12:30. We have now reached the end of our meeting for this morning. We will be having a short technical break at this stage and will then begin the interactive dialogue with the independent expert on Somalia. I hereby adjourn the meeting of the 36th session of the Human Rights Council. Thank you.
Yes.